The kinder you are, the more they make you feel guilty. And you keep apologizing until you forget that you're a human being with limits too. Have you ever noticed how often you say, "I'm sorry"? Not just when you've done something wrong, but when you turn down a favor, when you're too exhausted to reply right away, or simply because your needs don't align with someone else's. And worse, you apologize even when you're not exactly sure what you did wrong. That's not just politeness. It's a self-protective reflex, built from living too long in a state of guilt. Guilt that didn't start within you, but grew from harmless phrases repeated over and over by the people around you. I did everything for you, and you can't do this one little thing for me? If you really cared, you wouldn't act like this. Must be nice to keep everyone waiting. Yeah, you always put yourself first, don't you? Over time, you internalize a lesson. If you don't meet others' expectations, you'll disappoint them. You'll be seen as selfish, uncaring, and to avoid that, you apologize. Not because you're wrong, but because you're afraid of being rejected, afraid of someone being upset with you, afraid of losing their love, approval, or place in their heart. That's the trap of guilt tripping. The manipulator doesn't need to yell. They only need to plant guilt, a disappointed glance, a heavy silence, a quiet sigh that says, "I guess I'll just suffer through this." And suddenly, you feel like you're the problem. So you apologize. You take the blame to ease the tension. You sacrifice your time, energy, and emotions to keep the peace, to keep the connection. But what does it cost you? You stop saying no, even when you're overwhelmed. You stop expressing your true feelings because you don't want to seem selfish. You start feeling like you're never enough, no matter how much you give. You shrink yourself. You lose your personal boundaries. You live like your very existence is a burden to someone else. The truth is, guilt tripping isn't always loud or obvious. It's woven into daily interactions. It shows up in close relationships between parents and children, romantic partners, friends, even bosses and employees. And the most dangerous part? It's often mistaken for love, care, or sacrifice. But hear this. You are not wrong for needing rest. You are not bad for saying no to something beyond your limits. You are not selfish for having your own emotions. And you do not have to apologize for living within your truth and your boundaries. If "I'm sorry" has become your reflex every time you simply differ from someone's expectations, you might be living in a guilt-tripping ecosystem. And the first step out is to notice the small, repeated behaviors in your daily life that have shaped your silence. Guilt tripping, when guilt becomes a tool of control. Guilt tripping is a subtle yet powerful form of psychological manipulation. Instead of giving direct orders or applying open pressure, the manipulator makes you feel guilty for having needs, feelings, or boundaries, even when those things are completely valid. They may never outright say you're wrong, but they'll make you feel selfish, inconsiderate, or like you've caused harm. For example, if you politely decline a favor for a legitimate reason, they might respond with a sigh and say, "It's okay, I'm used to it. Everyone has their own life, I guess." It sounds gentle, but hidden beneath is a loaded message. You've hurt me. And suddenly, you start questioning yourself. Was I too harsh? Should I have tried harder? Did I just let them down? Over time, guilt tripping trains you to respond not with confidence, but with guilt. The other person doesn't have to control you. You start controlling yourself. You adjust your choices, suppress your needs, and override your instincts, all to avoid the uncomfortable feeling that you've done something wrong. The emotional manipulation hidden beneath the mask of love. What makes guilt tripping especially dangerous is that it's often disguised as love, care, or sacrifice. The manipulator might be someone close to you, a partner, a parent, even a dear friend, someone whose opinion deeply affects you. They don't yell, they don't threaten. Instead, they suggest that you've let them down, that you've made them sad, that you should live for others a little more. So you stretch yourself thin, trying to please them, to make it up to them. The guilt you feel doesn't come from doing something wrong. It comes from the shadow of their expectations. You're not allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to say no. You're not allowed to be tired, because if you are, you'll hurt them. But here's the truth. That hurt may be a tool, a way to keep you emotionally controlled. Guilt tripping is not real love, because real love isn't rooted in making you feel wrong. Real love is a space where you're allowed to be yourself, not a place where you constantly have to apologize for not being perfect. Losing personal boundaries. When you no longer know what you're allowed to feel. One of the earliest and most common effects of guilt tripping is a breakdown of your personal boundaries. When you're constantly made to feel guilty for simply being human, for feeling tired, needing rest, or wanting personal space, you start believing that those needs are selfish. And so, you begin to deny yourself. You stop saying no, even when you're overwhelmed. You hide your real emotions because you fear being judged. You don't ask for what you need, because every time you do, it makes you feel wrong. Over time, you lose the ability to recognize where you end and others begin. You give in. You overextend. You apologize, even when you're the one hurting. This leads to a constant state of quiet stress, inner conflict, and a haunting feeling that you're never enough. Eventually, guilt tripping becomes more than just something others do to you. It turns into something you start doing to yourself. An invisible habit of self-censorship, a slow erosion of your identity, a mental reflex that eats away at your sense of worth. Constant anxiety and the feeling that you are a burden. People who are repeatedly subjected to guilt tripping often develop a quiet, persistent form of social anxiety, a deep fear of making others upset, disappointed, or exhausted just by being themselves. You start anticipating others' reactions, constantly trying to please everyone, and becoming hyper-aware of even your most natural needs, like resting, expressing your opinion, or saying no. This fear doesn't come from reality. It comes from a warped inner belief. If I do this, they'll be hurt, and that will be my fault. The result? You shrink yourself. You live guarded, always adapting to others' emotions. You stop seeing yourself as someone worthy of love, and start seeing yourself as a burden, someone who needs to stay small, quiet, and unproblematic. The danger is that this mindset becomes so familiar, so disguised, that you can live years this way without realizing. You're not really living for yourself anymore. You're just trying to avoid disappointing everyone else. Losing self-worth and becoming dependent on external validation. Guilt tripping doesn't just make you question your actions. It makes you question your worth. When you're constantly apologizing, constantly making up for things that don't actually require fixing, you start to believe that you are the problem, that you're difficult, inconvenient, not good enough. And so, you begin to live your life trying to prove you're worthy of love, acceptance, kindness, by pleasing others. But here's the trap. That need for validation is never satisfied, because the manipulator keeps raising the bar, always expecting more, always making you feel like you're not quite enough. You become someone who's always trying, but never arriving. And along the way, your confidence fades, your self-respect erodes, and your belief that you have the right to exist fully with your own needs and emotions slowly disappears. Even worse, you start to depend on praise, agreement, or emotional approval to feel like you're allowed to take up space. You're no longer living from the inside out. You're living by watching people's faces, reading their tone, chasing their approval. And that's when guilt tripping has done its deepest work. It no longer needs to manipulate you, because you've already learned to manipulate yourself just to survive. Guilt-Laden Language, a subtle weapon disguised as love. One of the clearest signs of guilt tripping is the manipulative use of language designed to make you feel guilty, even when you've done nothing wrong. The manipulator rarely criticizes you outright or yells. Instead, they use implied statements, subtle suggestions that make you feel bad for simply doing what's reasonable or necessary for yourself. Common examples include, "I've done everything for you and this is how you treat me? If you really cared, you wouldn't have done that. You must be thrilled to have kept me waiting like that. It's okay, I'm used to it. You're always busy anyway." These words might sound soft, even affectionate, but what they actually plant inside you is a feeling that you've done something wrong, that your needs or actions have hurt someone, that you now have to make it up or fix things just to feel accepted again. When this kind of dialogue becomes a repeated pattern in a relationship, especially with people close to you, you start to automatically apologize or change your behavior, not because you believe you were wrong, but because you're afraid of making them upset, afraid you're a bad person. That's when you need to pause and ask yourself, am I reacting out of love or out of guilt? Inner emotional reactions, the subtle shrinking of self. You won't always hear a clear, obvious sentence that tells you you're being guilt-tripped. More often, you'll feel it in your body, in your emotions, in the quiet tension inside you. You won't always hear a clear, obvious sentence that tells you you're being guilt-tripped. More often, you'll feel it in your body, in your emotions, in the quiet tension inside you. You might feel guilty even after doing something perfectly reasonable, turning down an invitation, taking a break because you're exhausted, setting a boundary for your own well-being. You'll catch yourself thinking, was I being selfish? Did I hurt them? Am I a bad person for needing space? That's how guilt tripping works. It bypasses logic and burrows straight into your emotional core. So instead of spotting it with your mind, you have to observe how you feel after certain interactions. If you walk away from a conversation feeling heavy, unsettled, or blaming yourself, even when nothing openly wrong was said, pay attention. That might not be your guilt talking. It might be someone else's narrative imposed on your truth. Also watch for these signs. You constantly say sorry. You worry about being a burden. You try harder than necessary. You feel a quiet pressure every time you make a decision involving your own needs or boundaries. That's not just a kind personality trait. That may be the long-term effect of emotional manipulation through guilt. Recognizing this isn't about blaming anyone. It's about finally hearing your true inner voice and using it to begin untangling yourself from an invisible loop that's kept you small for far too long. Awareness is a first step to protecting yourself from imposed guilt. The first step in protecting yourself from guilt tripping is becoming aware of when you're feeling guilty, not because you've done something wrong, but because someone made you feel that way. Start by asking yourself, why do I feel guilty right now? Is it because I genuinely did something wrong, or because someone is disappointed in me? Being able to tell the difference between authentic guilt and manipulated guilt is key to understanding what's really happening. You also need to practice not immediately apologizing. When guilt shows up, give yourself a moment to pause and reflect. Did I actually do something hurtful? Are my feelings being dismissed? Are my needs being made to feel wrong? That pause, before you automatically say, I'm sorry, is exactly what the manipulator doesn't want. It breaks the cycle. Another helpful tool is emotional journaling. Every time you feel overwhelmed, uneasy, or full of regret after saying no or expressing your needs, write it down. What happened? What did they say? What did you feel? This practice helps you spot patterns of manipulation and build the inner clarity and confidence you need to protect your emotional boundaries. Learning to say no without feeling like the bad person. Many people don't fall into guilt tripping because they can't recognize it. They fall in because they don't know how to protect themselves without feeling cruel. But here's the truth. Saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you honest. A clear, compassionate no, without excuses or over-apologizing, is a sign of a mature adult with healthy boundaries. But to do this, you have to separate rejection from guilt. A simple trick. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry, I can't help," try saying, "I'm not able to take this on right now. I hope you understand." Shifting from apologizing, clear explaining, allows you to hold your boundary without blaming yourself. Also, pay attention. Are you saying yes because you genuinely want to, or because you feel pressured to? If your yes is often just a tool to avoid disappointment or conflict, it's time to start practicing healthy refusal. Because no true healing can happen if you're still saying yes to every expectation thrown at you. You don't have to agree just to keep the peace, especially when the cost of peace is you. Assertive communication, a tool for reclaiming emotional autonomy. Assertive communication is a key skill for protecting yourself from guilt-based manipulation. It's a way of expressing yourself honestly and respectfully without ignoring your own needs or emotions. People who are frequently guilt-tripped often fall into two extremes. They either stay silent and give in, or they explode and feel regret afterward. Both responses leave you feeling worse, powerless, and out of control. In contrast, assertive communication allows you to say something like, "I understand this is important to you, but right now I need to prioritize my health/mood/time." This kind of response doesn't dodge responsibility, but also doesn't hand your decisions over to someone else. Practicing assertiveness helps you reclaim a sense of inner control because it reminds you that you can respond kindly without sacrificing your boundaries. Also, seek support from trusted friends, a therapist, or a safe community. People who can remind you you don't need to apologize for living in alignment with your truth. Every time you speak your needs without self-blame, you begin to dismantle the deep-rooted structure of guilt-tripping that's been holding you back. Assertive communication doesn't make you selfish. It makes you someone who can love without losing yourself. We grow up in a world that often equates being a good person with being agreeable, with always being kind, always available, always self-sacrificing. And then one day, you realize you've been apologizing too much. Not just when you've done something wrong, but when you say no, when you set a boundary, when you express your emotions, or simply when you're tired. "I'm sorry, it's my fault" becomes a reflex, like an umbrella you open automatically to shield others from their emotional storms, even when you didn't cause the storm in the first place. If this feels familiar, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, am I apologizing for something that isn't actually wrong? If the answer is yes, you may be or may have been a victim of guilt tripping. Guilt tripping doesn't always come from bad people. It can come from those we love, from people who are hurting too. Sometimes it even comes from ourselves, from a lifelong habit of measuring our worth through someone else's approval, from the fear of disappointing others, from the belief that if we're not trying harder, we're being selfish. But here's the truth. You're not selfish for needing time for yourself. You're not unkind for not pleasing everyone. You're not wrong for saying no or protecting your own energy. Healing in this context is a rebellion. It's not becoming cold or detached. Healing is returning to your original self, the self that knows your needs, your feelings, and your boundaries are valid and worthy of respect. It's when you stop apologizing simply for existing. You can relearn how to say no without shaking from guilt. You can leave a relationship that makes you shrink without believing you're the bad guy. You can love others deeply without sacrificing yourself every time they need something. You don't need to apologize for being tired. You don't need to apologize for not living up to someone's expectations. You don't need to apologize for being different, for being you. You only need to live truthfully, with kindness that's rooted not in guilt, but in self-awareness and healthy limits. And if there's any apology to be made, perhaps it's to yourself, for the times you didn't live honestly, for the moments you let others define how you should feel, for believing you had to be perfect to be loved. But you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real, and that is enough. Healing begins the moment you realize you don't have to live to please everyone, especially when it costs you yourself. And if you're just now beginning that journey, the journey back to your true worth, know this: you are not alone. Do you often find yourself apologizing for things that don't truly warrant an apology? Are you trying so hard to please someone that you've traded away your own inner peace? If any of this sounds familiar, you are not alone, and you don't have to stay silent anymore. Share your story in the comments. Even if it's just a small moment, one time you said, "I'm sorry," and felt uneasy about it for hours, let it out. You never know. Your words might be the wake-up call someone else needs. Someone who's been quietly struggling, just like you once did. We read every single comment, and we're here to listen without judgment. If this video made you feel seen, comforted, understood, or even just a little less alone on your healing journey, please hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who might need to hear these words too. We weren't born to constantly apologize for existing. We were born to live fully, freely, and without having to say sorry for being ourselves.